Aloha and welcome to Your Heart Magic, an illuminating space where psychology, spirituality and heart wisdom meet. Here's your host, Dr. BethAnne Kapansky-Wright, the clinical psychologist with a mystic mind.
Aloha, everyone. This is Dr. BethAnne Kapansky-Wright. Welcome to Your Heart Magic. We are talking about the topic today, You Are the Oracle, Understanding Signs with a Twist. And I love talking about this topic. I think I say that with every topic, but I just get so excited about all of this. And some of what I bring through is my own understanding and my own experience and what I've pieced together in my spiritual journey and my learnings from myself and others. And some of this information is from the Akashic Records, who are always so kind prior to me hopping on here to help provide some additional information about the topic that we're going to be talking about. So we will be looking at, why should we care about signs in the first place? What is it about understanding signs and feeling empowered to work with them and being able to deconstruct the word oracle and kind of claim that for ourselves? Why is that important on our journey? And how can we work effectively with signs? What are some of the limitations of understanding signs and interpreting signs? And the twist part is just some new ideas on this information. When I originally had this idea to do this for a podcast, and a lot of times my ideas for a podcast really just come through where I will ask, what should I do next? And just open myself up to receiving. And every time there's here's your topic, here's your topic. So this was the topic this week that came through. And when I first looked at that, I really did not want to sit here and spend 30, 40 minutes talking about, if you see a heart in the cloud, that might be a sign from the angels. If a feather floats down in front of you, that's probably a sign that your angels are trying to get a hold of you. It just felt really redundant to me, and we will kind of tap into some of those things. But there's just some awesome people out there who have grounded those ideas for us. They've done the work. They've had the dialogues. They've written books. There's blog posts. There's just so much content. I wanted to bring through something a little bit new and a little bit fresh, and something that just kind of put Your Heart Magic's community's twist on understanding all of this. So that's the twist today. And we'll see what else shows up in this podcast. So first of all, let's talk about signs and why we should care about them. And, what about the signs? The Akashic Records actually called signs a forgotten language. That was the terminology that I saw those words flash in front of my mind as I was opening the records for this topic. And as I was opening the records, I was being inundated by images from history where signs and symbols have been used in different ways throughout ancient civilization into the modern day age, from cavemen and cave women, cave beings, chiseling on a wall for communication and leaving some form of a communication. Seeing that prior to written language up to now, where we use signs all the time still. How do you know what bathroom to go into? Usually there's a sign that shows you which way to go. How do you know if you're traveling in a foreign country and you don't speak the language? A lot of times there's these universal signs like, here's the toilets, here's the transportation, here is where food might be. These things are signs for those who speak sign language. That is all done through sign and symbolism. So sign language and signs and understanding signs and using signs, modern artists who put signs and colors and people who really work with graphic design, there are signs strewn throughout all of those. But it is a forgotten language in the sense that we are very reliant on verbal communication. We are reliant on speaking and writing and communicating primarily as that form of communication. And there are other forms out there. They are just underused, and over time in that underuse have often been a forgotten language to some extent. And what I was feeling in the records was this idea that there was a point in time where written language and communication existed, but signs were also acknowledged as a legitimate form, a normal form of communication, not something that was left to an oracle to interpret. If they see a raven, on the first day of December, and what that might mean for the crops in the years ahead, that they were an archetype around them, that there was an archaeology around them, and the shared history around what those things meant according to the collective consciousness of a culture. And so it was much more normalized and much more common. And there was more shared wisdom. We might look at that, if you want to break it down into the brain, right brain, left brain stuff, and sort of that logic verbal part of our brain versus more of the creative, intuitive, mystic minded part that speaks and feels more through signs and symbols and all of those things. So there's used to be really normal. And at this point, it is somewhat of a forgotten language. And when it's used in the socially appropriate context, like with travel or in an intentional way to say, this is what we use as this language, if for some reason written expression won't work, that's a little bit more accepted. But when we start to kind of bust out the spiritual stuff and say, somebody says to us, well, how do you know? And let's say they're not very spiritually open, curious, any of that. And you say, well, I got a sign. Some people are going to look at you a little bit funny. That is not going to be recognized as a legitimate form of communication, since we overvalue the rational mind. Well, you got a sign? Yeah, I had a dream about it. And then the next day I started seeing 1111s everywhere. And then, a few days after that, this showed up in the mail and it had this phrase in it and it related to what I was asking my question about. And, all these things kind of told me a story that helped me feel this is the right direction to go. You tell that to a person who is not open to that as a legitimate form of communication. And actually, if you've been in that experience before, you've experienced what happens. You're usually looked at skeptically. There might be some mockery that goes on. It depends on how empathic the individual is, regardless of their beliefs, but it's often not accepted. So we have these dialogues around these things to help them be a little bit more normalized. And that's actually what the record said. When I asked, what would you want people most to know? And that's kind of my last question before I close them. What do you want people to know above all? And it was this, let's normalize this. This is a normal form of communication that you should feel empowered to learn to do for yourself and to learn to work with. And to think about as a legitimate language that you are learning. How do you work with spirit, with your angels, with your guides, with the pattern itself to receive these signs and symbols and synchronicities that might help you feel that you are communicating with spirit and that you are effectively having these communications. There's a normalization there. They didn't really do like the hashtag no stigma, but that was the energy I got from the records, when it comes to this. So how do we do this in a way that feels practical and responsible and in our integrity? I am thinking that most of us who listen to this podcast are wanting to move about the world in a way where we really feel in alignment with our integrity. And a lot of times we have a fear around misinterpreting these things, or what if we're making it up? And sometimes that fear is a question of our own sanity. But I often think, I'll speak specifically to myself. My fear was really about, I want to be in integrity. So if I'm going to base how I'm thinking on this kind of communication, it was really important to me that I had a grasp on what I thought I was receiving and what I thought it meant. And that was something that I had grounded in some sort of knowledge or education, or something that felt a little bit more rational. And perhaps that's me trying to rationalize the mystic mind, but often spirit speaks through both. And so often I have found that when we are receiving sign, symbol, synchronicities, and those things, there is something about them that we're able to ground it and say, this is why I have confidence in this. And this is why I trust this. And I think that's important. And I'm going to just guess that those listening to this feel like it's important too. So how do we do that? Let's dive in. Let's say that you are starting out, or you're already a believer and you want to feel more empowered to work with signs in your life. And you are tired of maybe this verbiage that because you might not necessarily identify as psychically gifted, or maybe you are gifted in that capacity, but you feel like your gift is something else. And so you don't really recognize your ability to learn symbiology and learn these things. How do you begin to do that? Well, the first thing is to begin to work with the pattern. And one of the best things that I was ever told back when I moved to Kauai and 2017, and I was working with this psychic named Jan, and she said, work with the pattern, BethAnne, start developing a pattern around your spiritual practices. And I didn't quite understand why she was telling me that. And here's what I've learned about that. First of all, our universe is comprised of patterns. And even though there's a lot of stuff out there about chaos theory and things that are probably scientifically stuff that I shouldn't get into because I don't fully know what I'm talking about, there is a lot of things that move in patterns in our universe. There are these spirals, there's clusters of atoms and molecules. They form elements when they come together into certain compounds. There is DNA and the pattern that has in the human body, and genetic patterns of like, well, what if you have like, one more of this or one less of this? Like, what might that mean, and how your pattern is different and how that changes your biology or your experience. There are patterns to the seasons often, even when we're having unpredictable weather. Usually it is a sure bet that if it is January in Wisconsin, it's probably not the summer season. You are probably cold in January, especially if you live farther up north in that state. So there are these certain patterns and these natural laws in our world that we are all subject within, and we're working within. And mathematics is a pattern. Numbers are a pattern. Music is a pattern. And all of those things tend to be universal patterns because they defy language. So when something defies language and it is a universal pattern, and we are part of that pattern, it is a great way to begin to consciously work with the pattern in order to develop a practice and let spirit know, hey, I am paying attention. I am working with the pattern. For myself personally, my spiritual practice consisted of, and it still does, sitting down in my journal, writing out what is coming through. I am a big journaler, and it's not like, dear diary, today this happened. Sometimes I process feelings that way, but I'm more likely to note what's going on in my life. What does my intuition say? Anything can be in those pages, from my to-do list to what's been showing up for me spiritually. So I just use it as a place to ground like my experience in life. And then I started using oracle cards, archetype cards, tarot cards to work with the pattern. I already enjoyed that. They made sense to me. I wanted to keep expanding that knowledge. It's so rich in history and imagery. And what I began to notice over time as I worked with that pattern is that cards began to take on a deeper nuance, a deeper meaning. I would find I was pulling the same sort of card for something that I was querying, or that it would keep coming up for a certain topic. Because I was journaling every day and I was sitting down and I was trying to come into my heart, I became more aware of how I felt in that moment. And that helped me recognize patterns within myself, like when I might just feel really cloudy and fuzzy and nothing was coming through. versus when I might feel this stream of consciousness flowing through me and feel like something was really resonating with my heart, or I just had a moment of, oh, that's it. And I had those insights. I noticed those differences because I was creating a pattern around a spiritual practice, which is why I feel it's so important to create spiritual practices. I don't care what they are. I don't care what you do. It is less important about that and just more important about the intention and creating a time that you let spirit know in this moment. I'm not being distracted with what's happening on social media or what's happening over here. I'm looking up and I'm looking inward and I'm listening and I'm wanting to connect. It becomes easier for spirit to get a hold of us in that moment. Think about a time that you are trying to get somebody's attention and they're like on their phone or something like that. And they're texting and they tell you, oh no, I'm totally listening. I'm totally listening. I can do both things at once. First of all, let's just kind of pause there and I'll laugh. And I've also done that. I'm sure we've all done that. But can we? Like, can somebody do two things at once and multitask that well, like so much so that they're able to write that text and be articulate and also listen and give you their full undivided attention? I don't know. I'm kind of skeptical that that's actually happening in that moment. So when we do the same thing in our spiritual relationship, it's certainly not impossible for spirit to get through. You know, if that is us trying to communicate to a friend or communicate to somebody, we might be like, hey, and like clap our hands or be like, this is really important. Or I'm going to wait until you're done with that because you seem distracted, you know, so I'm going to just wait to communicate to you. Like, you know, we can still get through to somebody then. Spirit can still get through to us, but it's much easier when we're paying attention and when we're grounding it into a space. The other thing about patterns is that when we begin to notice things within a pattern, like numbers is a good one, right? How often do we look at the clock per day? So when we see numbers and start to see the 1111s or the 222s or something like that, we're working with the pattern. So the first thing is just this awareness with the pattern and beginning to work with the pattern and developing a spiritual practice with the patterns in your life. And the other thing that I want to add on to that is informing the pattern of what you want to see. If you want more signs to show up in your life and you want to empower yourself to be like your own oracle and to like really feel like you are developing this language, put it out there and say, hey, universe, hey, God, hey, angels, however you think about the mysteries. I want to develop this language of seeing signs. I want to understand it better. I am looking to actively develop this knowledge, help things start showing up in the pattern that resonate with me. What a great way to use your voice to inform this interconnection that you are very much a part of, how you would like to work with that interconnection. Spirit is paying attention. And this is why in different cultures, signs and symbols can sometimes vary because something that is meaningful in one part of the world might be something so regular in another part, it's not even paid attention to. A bird that shows up that is a rare bird in your part of the world might be something that is not rare somewhere else. They see them all the time. So it's not going to get somebody's attention. But for you, if you know it's a rare sighting and say, oh my gosh, I never see a red-headed whatever, you know, in February and whatever, you are more likely to cue in and say, gosh, I wonder if that's a sign. I wonder if there's something there for me. So this kind of brings me into the next point with developing our own language of being the oracle and working with signs, and that is to begin to pay attention. Because when we pay attention and we begin to observe the world around us, we start to give the pattern more opportunities to show itself what might want to come through. So if we're actively putting out there, angels, I really want a sign, or I'm really worried about my loved one. They've crossed over. I'm really sad. I really feel like I really like a sense of their presence. When we're paying attention, it creates more opportunities for a sign to come through when we're actively saying, okay, I know my message was heard. I believe that something is coming my way to give me that reassurance. It helps if we're actually like looking up and looking around. I'm seeing a comical illustration maybe in my mind right now as I say that, where in this illustration, I've not seen it. This is just kind of a picture coming into my head. The person's like looking down and they got a little dark cloud over them and they're stewing and they're saying like, I just really wish I could get a sign, and what I'm seeing is like a red cardinal flying up overhead and a feather that's laying at their feet and, a cloud in the shape of a heart that's behind them. And like their watch says like 3:33 on it, and maybe there's like signs all around them and they're just not paying attention because they're not looking up. So we have to pay attention. And when we pay attention, we try and do so without a huge attachment to how it's going to come through. We just pay attention and trust that if we're looking at the pattern, whatever's meant to show up will show up for us. Common ways that things do come through. And like I said, we will just lightly touch on this since a lot of it's already been written about. It is common for people to find pennies, some sort of a change that they associate with something. Numbers are common. Music is common. Hearing the same lyric or the same song, something that is really meaningful to you. Nature is common. Birds, something happening, a butterfly coming across your path. All of these things are ways that spirit can speak. And, nature is intrinsically already linked into the spirit world and in communication. So it's just a little bit easier for the signs to come through that way. But a sign could be that you are scrolling on social media and you have been asking a question and you just see some quote and maybe it moves you to tears and you think, oh my gosh, that's it. Like I have been wondering this all day. And like, that's exactly what I was hoping in my heart to have some clarity on. Like that just summed everything up. I feel so clear right now. So it can really come through in so many forms. It's really a matter of like what patterns we move in and how spirit can help move within those patterns. If somebody never gets out in nature, but they're always on the screen, please don't be that and get out in nature. But let's just say in theory that they don't really live somewhere natural. So it's really hard for them. They would live in a cold place, maybe they live in the city. They just have a hard time and they're more likely to be indoors and to watch something or to read something or to listen to something. Then messages will be more likely to show up that way. So spirit works with what we have. There's no limitation here on resources and spirit saying like, I see where you're at. I'm going to meet you down there. I'm going to help you kind of get the guidance that you're looking for. So like, let's not limit how it might come through. When we are paying attention, the next thing we do is we start to make a note of it. Because when we start to make a note of what is showing up, what we are doing is we are developing a sense of the pattern in our own life. So this is where I want to just kind of touch on interpreting signs and understanding signs and what to do when they show up. And we'll get into a little bit later what to do, how we limit, how signs are limiting and how we can limit them. But what I want to say about interpretation is that often we might not always know the interpretation too soon. Now, if you have said, I'm looking for a message for a loved one, and usually when I think of them in the past, I've seen red cardinals. That's one that seems like a common one that some people have experienced, or a bird with red on it. So please send me a bird with red on it. If you have done that, you're more likely to probably see a bird with red on it because you've asked the information to come through in that very direct way. But what if you've just said, I really want to receive a message from a loved one. I need to know they're okay. Please send me a sign. And you left it open-ended. Maybe you don't want to limit spirit. Maybe you want to just see what shows up. The first thing we do is we pay attention. The second thing we do is we make note of what feels meaningful. So if something feels synchronistic or it feels meaningful for you, making a mental note or writing it down in your journal is a beautiful thing. Often especially if it's the first time we receive it, we may or may not know that that sign is meant for us. It's very common for us to say, I just saw a feather, but I'm at the beach and there's a lot of seagulls here and there's actually a lot of feathers. So even though this feather kind of felt meaningful because it floated down at my feet, when I look around the beach, there's feathers everywhere. Was that a sign? I don't know. Just make a note of it. Make a note and just say, okay, I think that might have been you, but I'm going to need some more. I'm down here on earth. I've got some human limitations. Help me. I'm going to need some more confirmation here. It's okay to do that. And keep paying attention. Maybe you notice later that day that a song that they really loved, like comes on the radio or plays on your Spotify or something like that. And you think, oh my gosh, like they love this song, or maybe you're watching something on Netflix or you're watching a favorite show and somebody says something like, well, everything happens for a reason. And you think, oh my gosh, my grandma always said that. She always said that. First the feather, then the song. Now that's what she said. That's why we make a note of it, because when it happens in threes or when something happens and it's happening kind of more and more, that gives us more confidence to say, I think I can believe this. Like, I think that my prayer and my request has been heard and is being answered. So we pay attention and we just make note of it. And that is how we build trust in signs. And that is how we build vocabulary in signs. And what I want to bring into this is that when we talked about the Akashic Records and the episode, The Light of the Akashic Records, one of the things that I mentioned is that working with the records is a little bit like learning a new language. And the way the information comes through, there's a little bit of a learning curve. And that sometimes people get really frustrated with themselves because I don't know why we don't go into like geometry on day one in high school and somehow expect that the math teacher is going to be like, here's a proof. And somehow we're going to be able to like move through the book and master the proof and know what it means. But a lot of times it's like we have this weird expectation for ourselves that if something shows up, we should know what it means and we're missing something, or we think that we should like that there's like this big grand meaning. And if we don't figure it out, we're missing it. And we've missed some like big, vital, important clue in our life. And that's not really how it works, at least not in my understanding. Maybe somebody's had that experience. But what I found is that we are learning a language here. And languages are meant to be developed. When we learn French, I don't speak French, but if I was to take French, I would have to start at the beginning. I know like bonjour and probably like brie. We have to learn. There's a learning curve. And so often, and maybe it's because we expect our intuition to just know. And sometimes our intuition does just know. But, a lot of times our intuition does work with our logical mind or our verbal mind. They a lot of times work together. It's not like we are only gifted the right brain or the left brain and there's no relationship. We might have an overly rational mind. And so we're working on developing the intuitive and mystic mind in these things. But they're meant to work in symbiosis. They're meant to work together. It's not meant to exist independently of each other. That's part of unification in our understanding of our own selves and our, mental intelligence, and unifying the two different sides of our brain. Unification is unifying our divine feminine and our divine masculine. It's unifying our shadow side and our light side. That is what wholeness is. It's not just one or the other. It's both. So these things work together. And so this expectation that somehow we should just know, even the wisest oracles did not know everything. And if you ever read anything rooted in history, and look at somebody who was maybe a shaman or an oracle or was revered in their culture or their tribe or in mythology somehow, they often trained under somebody. They often had a mentor. They often did a vision quest or some sort of priestess training or some sort of mystery, magic school training. There was often some sort of apprenticeship in order to teach them how to be a receiver of the signs. Even those who are extremely psychically gifted can't tell you everything. I have worked with a lot of intuitives and some different psychics over the years. Super fun. I wanted to do a survey course and be like, what's out there? How do people's different gifts come through? And they can tell me some like really big pieces. But one of the things that I found is that nobody said, here is like the solutions and the answers and what it's meant to look like. It's just not how it is. So we're meant to educate ourselves and we're meant to learn things and we're meant to grow into it. So let's ground this idea of being our own oracle and understanding signs. Like, let's ground it in that we can't forget about the importance of just developing a language and a vocabulary around what something means. And the more that something comes through to you, so let's say you're seeing butterflies everywhere and you decide to look up, well, what does a butterfly mean? And so let's say you Google it and there's all this information about that. I think that's awesome. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Take it all with a grain of salt. It is the internet. But if something really resonates for you and you say, wow, like butterflies are a symbol of metamorphosis and transformation. I feel like I'm going through that right now. I think I'm in the cocoon phase. Like, awesome. Especially if you keep seeing butterflies, like, that feels very supportive to me. But maybe you take it a step further and maybe you write down your relationship with butterflies. What do you know about butterflies? Have they shown up in your life before? Has this ever been a sign that you had a different time period and you were really drawn to butterflies? What do you know about the history or the archetype of the butterfly? And just paying attention and developing this knowledge base of what something means will always serve us well, because the more we know about something, the more fun it becomes. And the more we are able to take something that shows up in our life and have this rich knowledge base of all these different, it's not just meanings, but a more holistic sense of what it means. So it's not this multi-dimensional, what does 1111 mean? It means you're having a spiritual awakening. It can mean that. 1111 means a lot of things. There's actually like a rich archetype around it. If you research angel numbers and the meaning of the numbers, what's the meaning of one? What's the mathematical meaning of one? What's the symbolism behind that? What does one represent? When you think about the number one, what does it mean to you? What associations do you have with it? The more that comes through, the more you almost get like this holistic experience of the number. And it makes for a more nuanced, rich experience than if you just have this like, oh, I'm seeing 1111s. What does it mean? Oh, well, you're having a spiritual awakening. Well, what if you've had a spiritual awakening and it's actually not a very applicable thing to you? And that feels very like a pat answer, and does not hold any personal relevance in your life at this time. How do we take that further? We take it further by developing vocabulary around it. And that's how we develop discernment. Because one of the things that is often a risk, I suppose, or a drawback of working with signs is this idea that one, we should know exactly what they mean. And if we don't, we're somehow missing something. And two, it is interpreting them too soon before we actually know what something means. And sometimes what happens when we do this is we are interpreting it in the context of what we want to see, as opposed to what might actually be coming through. So part of discernment is that paying attention, and it is developing more of a patience around these things. And it is developing a little bit of a, does this resonate with me? What if you say, I dreamed of a hawk in my dreams last night, and you get online and I don't actually know this. I'm 100% making this up, but you see some source on the internet that says when you dream of a hawk, it means that you're easy prey. and that you should beware because something's coming that is going to prey on you. Okay, that's really scary. Like that that doesn't feel good. That's fear-based consciousness right there. That is not something that says I'm going to keep my heart open to what this sign might mean. Like if I were to read that and I didn't know better because I didn't feel empowered to work with these in a more fluid way, like that might freak me out. And then I might start going through relationships in my life and be like, well, who's lying to me? Is it this? Maybe it's work. Maybe there's something that's going on at work. Oh my gosh, my coworker, said this the other day, and I don't always get the best vibe from them. And she was talking to so-and-so. Maybe it means this. No, spirit does not speak in signs in a way that's meant to scare us. Like we do not receive messages that are meant to put fear in our hearts. We might occasionally receive something that's cautionary, like, hey, have some wisdom here, slow down, like yellow light. But it's never meant to be this fear-based thing. So you have this vision or whatever of a hawk in your dream. It would actually be much more useful probably for you to sit down in your journal and write about what's your relationship to hawks. Have you ever seen one before? Have you heard any stories about them? Maybe you do some research and see what's out there about them. And maybe you write all of that down and say, well, some places say it's this, some places say it's this. And then you ask yourself the question, does any of this resonate with me? Does any of this really make me light up inside or feel warm or feel like I'm opening? Does any of this feel personally meaningful to me? And if the answer is yes, keep moving in that direction. It's probably connected to that personal meaning. If the answer is no, this feels really confusing, then keep paying attention. It is 100% okay to say, hey guys, I feel like somebody's trying to get my attention. Like spirit world, I'm listening. That was really telling in my dream. That felt really profound to me, but I don't get what that's about. So could you please bring it through in some other shape or form so I understand the message? I do this all the time when I'm working with the Akashic Records, and maybe I'll get an image on something that I don't entirely understand, or maybe it's too close to something that I've either seen before or something where I have a flash in a moment where my mind's like, I think I got that from the records, but what if that's my imagination? And it's really common for me to say, I really need a clear picture. Could you bring that through in some sort of an image that's not as familiar to me so I can make sure that it's coming from the records? They've never said no. They never said no, BethAnne, we already gave it to you once and we're really mad at you that you're questioning our judgment and how we delivered this information. And so we're not going to bring it through. Go figure it out. It is so not how it works. So just ask. This is how we become our own oracle. It's not to kind of present ourselves as I am this phenomenal psychic who understands everything showing up in my path. Even people who've grown that gift took the time to develop it and took the time to understand it. They took the time to develop a relationship with it, and they took the time to develop a space of trust, just like any other relationship, to say, I trust these messages. We would not have a first date with somebody and say, oh my gosh, this is the person I'm going to marry. I just realized there's some celebrities who've done that. Okay. Most people would not go on one date and in that moment, go to Vegas and be like, I've met my soulmate, we're getting married. You might have a date and feel like, I think I met the person I'm meant to be with. And as you date, you really start to be like, yeah, I knew it from the start, but there's this natural progression to the relationship. But you wouldn't overnight just go from just meeting for the first time to having this intimate relationship and expect that you're going to be soulmates and know everything about each other and it's all going to be okay. We have to develop trust with anything in our life. So we develop trust in our relationship with others. We develop it in ourselves. And of course we can develop it with spirit. Of course we can develop it, a trusting relationship with I trust the signs. At this point in my journey, I trust what comes through because I've been living it for long enough now that I've seen the truth and the messages that I receive. I trust the Akashic Records because I have been working with them long enough now to see that more often than not, what's coming through seems to really resonate with people when I bring through collective messages. those themes seem to happen. It's not about being right. We have to lose our attachment to being right or being wrong. Let spirit be right or wrong. And instead, it's about staying open and developing a trusting relationship over time and saying, hey, I trust this because it keeps showing up for me. I trust that when I see butterflies, I know that it is my sister on the other side, because that was her favorite, symbol. And ever since she's gone, I've just been seeing them everywhere, and it's never changed. I trust it. It is a relationship that we develop over time. All right. Last piece, limitations of signs. So we tapped on this a little bit, but I do want to talk about a couple important limitations. First of all, one is, we already said it, it's interpreting it too soon. So we already covered that. We're going to stay open. We're going to try and resist the urge to do that. But connected to interpreting too soon, kind of the second one here is when we project what we want onto it. And so we're actually not really open to what it means. And this is where things get really sticky for a lot of people. And this is when sometimes we have miscommunication with spirit, or miscommunication with our spiritual relationship, where we say, I thought I was following the signs the best I knew how, and it didn't work out. And like, what happened? Why didn't you show me? Sometimes it is still working out. You're just judging it based on a moment. The bigger picture hasn't happened yet. But sometimes what happens is we have put our own interpretation of what we thought was going to happen. And I'm going to give you a really good example of that. This is a story I've told a few times before, but back when we first moved to the island, was December of 2017. And I remember at the time, what was happening in my like life circumstances is my husband had been doing some job hunting, and I think he'd had a couple interviews, and was hoping to, find something on the island at the time. And I had gotten it in my mind that a job offer was coming through by December 15th. And at the time, I think I'd opened the Akashic Records, and that might be where I got that from. I want to say I maybe pulled some tarot cards, probably saw a couple angel numbers. And for some reason, I was really stuck on this is the date. And side note, when we have a really strong attachment to how we want something to go, we're innately biased, so it might not be as clear. There's a very good chance that I interpreted all of that through the lens of what BethAnne wanted in her little world, as opposed to what might have been being told to me. But I really believed. I was a believer, and I use the metaphor that if you have seen The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, I was Linus, and I was sitting in my pumpkin patch on Halloween night, and I had the most sincere pumpkin patch, and the Great Pumpkin, he was coming. I was ready for him. And what happened was, as that week went on, it was a Friday that week, I was like, at first, like, okay, this is the week. All right, we're doing this. It's happening. And as the week went on, I was like, okay, it hasn't happened yet, but that's okay, because it's going to. Like, I got the confirmation. This is happening. It's happening by this Friday. And now it's Thursday night. And I remember thinking like, oh, spirit, like, oh, you guys, you really are just going to wait till the last minute. You're just really testing my faith. And that sentiment like increased and grew like all through Friday, and now it's like 3:30 in the afternoon. And I remember being in my little home office, and I was working on some art, and I still believed, like, I'm still in my pumpkin patch. And I still was like, oh, you funny angels, you really know how to push things to the last minute and make a grand entrance. Well, Friday the 15th or whatever day it was right around that. It came and went, and no phone call was made. And a phone call did come the next day. And I remember in my head being like, I knew it. It was only a day off. Do you hear the attachment to I was only a day off? I'm going to just loop back to what I said about losing our attachment to being right and just call myself to the carpet on that. I did it to myself. And it actually was not an offer. It was a thanks, we chose somebody else. And I was so mad after all of that. And I actually I'll keep this short looking at the time here. But I went on strike and that's what I said. I was like, I am on strike. I will receive no more messages. Like, I am mad at you. I was like such a 40-year-old child, I think, throwing a temper tantrum because I didn't get what I wanted, how I wanted. And I had a lot of growth to do during that time. So what do I make of this? Here's what I would go back and tell myself. I first down probably sit down and put my arm around her and be like, hey, younger self, you are awesome. I'm so proud of you that you've made this move and that you and your husband, that you're opening to this new life here and you're trying to make a new path for yourself. You're so brave and awesome. You don't even know it yet. I know a few things that you don't yet know. And it's all going to be okay. But, let's take a deep breath together. And you might be disappointed here. And you're going to draw the conclusion that the great pumpkin doesn't exist. And you're going to be really mad for a while until you kind of stop your temper tantrum and remember that the metaphorical great pumpkin is always there, available to all of us, just doesn't always show up at the time and date that we want. And I would tell myself that all those signs and things that you thought you were interpreting, you just got the date wrong, girl. That's it. All that confirmation that you had did not mean a job wasn't coming. It eventually came. It came in the right divine timing, which apparently is not BethAnne's timing. I'm continually shocked by this, and I keep learning the same lesson. And I would tell myself, you didn't get anything wrong. You just had an attachment to how you think you were going to look. And so I'm going to give you a better question to ask. And instead of the question of when, which it's not a bad question, it's just a tricky question because we often have an attachment to what we want to see. What I would say to myself is just keep asking, hey, angels, I just need some signs that it's going to be okay. There's a lot of transformation happening. A lot of stuff is up in the air. I just want some confirmation. And then, girl, pay attention to what shows up. They'll come through. You will see the angel numbers. You will see the butterflies. You will get what you need to feel supported. And that's what I would tell us about the limitation of this, is that often we attach to how we want it to look. And so we miss the bigger picture, that our prayer is being answered. The reassurance is there. It's right in front of us. And then we're mad at it because it doesn't tell us what we want to see. And what if spirit is sitting on the other side, kind of and our older self, we'll say our higher self, kind of putting their arm around each and every one of us and being like, hey, you, how's it going? I can tell you're really bummed out. You didn't get what you wanted here. But you know what? We are giving you so much confirmation that your prayers are being heard. We are giving you confirmation that we are on it. We are not leaving you floundering in your SOS, not being heard. So we're going to keep sending those quarters or those dimes to you. We're going to keep giving you the clouds. We're going to be sending those birds. We're going to give you the numbers. We're going to give you meaningful song lyrics. We're going to put people in your path who hand you something important, and it's going to hit your heart and you're going to say, yes, I think I just collected another piece of the puzzle. We will do all those things for you because we want you to know that you're not alone. Can you just take a deep breath and let us do our job and not get so angry at how we're doing it? Because we're trying to give you a bigger message than, yeah, you're going to get what you want in your own timing. We're trying to let you know that you are always supported. And if you get that and you can live by that, that will change your life. It is not life-changing to be told you're going to get what you want, how you want it, in the timeline that you want it in. That's not life-changing. That's indulging, I don't know, a child or my dog who sits and begs for a treat in the evening. Sometimes I give in because he's so adorable. That's not growth there. What if you're being told what you need to truly support you on your path as opposed to what you want to hear? And that is what signs actually are about. And that is the value of learning to live with them and trust them and build a relationship with them. Spirit wants us to see the bigger picture, not just be told you're going to get it how you want it. That's not spiritual growth. that is our attachment to what we want. And sometimes we do get that. Sometimes that's absolutely in alignment. But the bigger piece is you are loved, you are seen, you are held. We are communicating with you. Look up, look within, look around, and feel empowered to know this is a normal language for you to start working with to develop your own sense of relationship. All right. That wraps up today's episode. And I'm excited about next week. I did the thing I've been doing. I put my hand on my heart. I said, what topic is next? And I'm going to tell you what came through. Navigating chaos and conflict. We're going to be talking about how do you navigate chaos and conflict in this world. We're not exactly living in the easiest times right now. If you've been paying attention and being a participant in the human experience. And I want to talk about like, how do we actually move through hardship and struggle and all of that with a little bit more grace and ease? And how do we find center in that? That doesn't require us to like go camp out somewhere and just like cut ourselves off from humanity and have no relationship with it and somehow pretend that we're isolated from the world going on around us. Like, how do we stay connected, but also maintain inner peace and grounding? So we will see what wants to present itself this time next week. Whenever I sit down to do this podcast. And in the meantime, have an amazing week. Have a beautiful week. And until next time, be well, be love, be you, and be magic.
You've been listening to Your Heart Magic with Dr. BethAnne Kapansky-Wright. Tune in next week for a new episode to support and empower your light.